Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Our Moxmaster CEDH webcam tournament is this coming Saturday. It is 100% proxy friendly and is played in the comfort of your own home. There is $2,000 in prizes and payouts to top 16. We also pay out to top 32 in points towards our Moxmasters Invitational coming October 27th through the 29th. There are still some tickets left, so sign up today. Before we get into today's video, I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor, HelloFresh. We as Magic players love efficiency, and that's why we recommend HelloFresh. Instead of trying to plan out your grocery list, just pick out the meals that you want and HelloFresh takes care of the rest. It allows you to spend less time planning out your meals and more time brewing your decks. Magic players love variety, and HelloFresh delivers with over 40 recipes and over 100 seasonal and convenience items to choose from each week. With so much variety, there are options for everyone and every lifestyle. I don't personally like eating the same thing over and over, so I enjoy that I can try new things all the time. Looking for an easy way to eat well and save money this year? Cut back on expensive takeout and delivery and get started with HelloFresh. It is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% cheaper than takeout. April is Earth Month, and HelloFresh is always committed to a cleaner planet. On average, HelloFresh meals have a 31% lower carbon footprint than the same meals made from supermarket ingredients. Plus, nearly all HelloFresh packaging materials are curbside recyclable in most areas of the US. Give HelloFresh a try today. Use my link or go to HelloFresh.com and use code POGPowerMay16 to get 16 free meals plus free shipping. Once you click, my description will live update to count up the purchases. A big thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Ashani piloting Rocco, Cabaret Caterer. This is a toolbox deck that looks to tutor up various creatures to quickly adapt to any board state. Ashani's opening hand contains a Misty Rainforest, Birds of Paradise, Grasp of Fate, Imperial Recruiter, Beast Within, Plateau, and Aquarian Ranger. Next, we have Zach piloting Niv-Mizzet Perun. This is a control deck that aims to combo off with a Curiosity effect and its commander in order to ping the table to death. Zach's opening hand contains a Cephalid Coliseum, 2 islands, Flooded Strand, Jataxian Probe, Sol Ring, and a Goblin Engineer. After that, we have Ryan piloting Rionya, Fire Dancer. This is a spicy mono red deck, and its main goal is to create infinite combat steps with its commander's powerful ability. Ryan's opening hand contains a Chrome Mox, Mountain, Deflecting Swat, Urza Saga, Reckless Impulse, Seize the Day, and his Lennon Mulligan is a Mountain. Finally, we have Sean piloting the partner pair of Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator and Vial Smasher the Fierce. This deck has classic Grixis shenanigans that looks to combo with Underworld Breach, win with Thassa's Oracle, or take over the table with other powerful cards. Sean's opening hand contains a Scalding Tarn, Marsh Flats, Chain of Vapor, Sol Ring, Talisman of Dominance, Gamble, and his Lennon Mulligan is a Bloodstained Mire. Be sure to check us out on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, and find us on TikTok. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more great content. Without further ado, let's kick off this quirky, questionable, quintessential quarrel. Ashani had the most moving interpretive dance and gets to start us off. Ashani draws a card for turn and plays a Misty Rainforest. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Taiga onto the battlefield. He casts a Birds of Paradise. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He gives the turn to Zach. Zach draws and plays an island. He pays 2 life to cast Jataxian Probe, targeting Sean. He looks at Sean's hand and draws a card. He casts a Sol Ring. Zach passes. Ryan draws and plays an Urza Saga, getting its first counter. He casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Seize the Day. He casts a Reckless Impulse, exiling a Crystal Vein and a Rite of Flame. He ends his turn. Sean draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts a Sol Ring. He follows it up with a Talisman of Dominance. He ships the turn to Ashani. Ashani draws and plays a Plateau. He cracks his Jeweled Lotus to help cast his commander, Rocco, Cabaret Caterer, where X equals 2. Rocco enters, and Ashani fetches up a Dockside Extortionist onto the battlefield. Dockside enters, and Ashani creates 6 treasures. He casts an Imperial Recruiter. It enters, and Ashani fetches up a Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker into his hand. He casts Aquarian Ranger. He passes. Zach draws and plays a Flooded Strand. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He floats a blue, then casts Frantic Search. He draws 2, discards 2, and untaps his 2 lands. He casts a Brainstorm. He draws 3 and puts 2 back on top. He casts a Goblin Engineer. It enters, and he fetches up a Jeweled Lotus into his graveyard. Zach gives the turn to Ryan. During his upkeep, Ryan loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws, and in his first main phase, Urza Saga gets another counter. He plays a Crystal Vein from exile as his land for turn. He casts Rite of Flame from exile, adding 2 red. Ryan casts his commander, Rionya, Fire Dancer. He ends his turn. Sean draws and plays a Marsh Flats. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Badlands onto the battlefield. He casts his commander, Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator. Sean passes. Ashani draws and casts a Grasp of Fate. It enters and exiles Goblin Engineer, Rionya, and Malcolm. Ryan moves Rionya to the command zone. Ashani moves to combat and attacks Sean with all of his creatures. Sean takes the hit, and Ashani ships the turn to Zach. Zach draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He ends his turn. During his upkeep, Ryan wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws, and in his first main phase, Urza Saga triggers. He floats mana and sacrifices it, fetching up a Soul Ring onto the battlefield. He casts a Chaos Warp, targeting Grasp of Fate. It resolves, Ashani shuffles in Grasp of Fate, and then reveals a Mana Crypt, putting it onto the battlefield. Grasp of Fate triggers, and Malcolm, Rionya, and Goblin Engineer return to the battlefield. Goblin Engineer enters, and Zach fetches up a Spellskite into his graveyard. Ryan ends his turn. Sean draws and casts a Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards a Chain of Vapor. He plays a Command Tower as his land for turn. He casts a Glenhorn Buccaneer. In response, Zach casts Mana Drain, countering Glenhorn. Sean moves to combat and takes his revenge out on Zach by attacking him with Malcolm. Zach takes the hit, Malcolm triggers, and Sean creates a treasure. With nothing else, Sean passes. At the end of Sean's turn, Ashani activates his Quirion Ranger, returning Taiga to his hand and untapping his Birds of Paradise. He casts Beast Within, targeting Goblin Engineer. In response, Zach cracks his Scalding Tarn, pays a life, and fetches up a Steam Vents onto the battlefield untapped, paying 2 life. Zach hard casts Deflecting Swat, changing the target of Beast Within to Imperial Recruiter. Beast Within resolves, Imperial Recruiter is destroyed, and Ashani creates a 3/3 Beast. The turn moves to Ashani. During Ashani's upkeep, he loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and plays a Taiga. He casts a Temur Sabertooth. The table knows that this is game over, so in response, Ryan casts a Braid, dealing 3 damage to Dockside Extortionist, killing it. Temur Sabertooth then resolves, and Ashani casts Lightning Bolt, killing Goblin Engineer. Ashani moves to combat and attacks Zach with Rocco, Quirion Ranger, and his Beast. Zach takes the hit, and Ashani gives the turn to Zach. Zach draws, and in his first main phase, he adds 3 colorless through Mana Drain. He casts a Felwar Stone. He ends his turn. During Ryan's upkeep, he wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and moves to combat. He attacks Sean with Rionya. Sean takes it, and Ryan passes. At the end of Ryan's turn, Sean taps his Talisman of Dominance to help cast a Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. The turn moves to Sean. Sean draws and casts Reanimate, targeting the Glenhorn Buccaneer in his graveyard. In response, Zach hard casts Force of Negation. In response, Sean hard casts Force of Will, targeting Force of Negation. Force of Will resolves, Force of Negation is countered, and with Reanimate still in the stack, Ryan casts a Deflecting Swat, targeting Reanimate. Deflecting Swat resolves, changing the target of Reanimate to Zach's Goblin Engineer in his graveyard. Reanimate resolves, Goblin Engineer enters, and Sean loses 2 life. Engineer triggers, and Sean fetches up a Lion's Eye Diamond into his graveyard. He moves to combat and attacks Zach with Malcolm. Zach takes the hit, Malcolm triggers, and Sean creates a treasure. Sean ends his turn. During Ashani's upkeep, he wins his Mana Crypt trigger. He draws and casts a Toski, Bearer of Secrets. He moves to combat and attacks Sean with his Beast and Temur Sabertooth, and attacks Zach with Quirion Ranger and Rocco. Both players take the hit, Toski triggers, and Ashani draws 4 cards. In his second main phase, Ashani plays a Gemstone Caverns. He casts an Archon of Emeria. He ships the turn to Zach. Zach draws and plays an Otawara Soaring City into play tap through Archon of Emeria. He gives the turn to Ryan. During his upkeep, Ryan wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and plays a Cursed Mirror, entering as a copy of Toski. He moves to combat and attacks Zach with Rionya and a Cursed Toski. Zach takes the hit, Toski triggers, and Ryan draws 2 cards. Ryan passes. Sean draws and moves to combat. He decides to continue to pick on Zach, attacking him with Malcolm. Zach takes it, Malcolm triggers, and Sean creates a treasure. In his second main phase, Sean taps his Talisman of Dominance to help cast a Dothy Voidwalker. He ends his turn. During Ashani's upkeep, he wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and moves to combat. He attacks Ryan with Quirion Ranger and Zach with the rest of his creatures. Both players take the hit, and Zach dies. His Goblin Engineer that is under Sean's control ceases to exist. Toski triggers, and Ashani draws 6 cards. In his second main phase, Ashani plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Stomping Ground onto the battlefield untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Tendershoot Dryad and gains the city's blessing. He ships the turn to Ryan. During Ryan's upkeep, Ashani creates a 1/1 Sapperling, and Ryan wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and casts a Cathartic Pyre, dealing 3 damage to Archon of Emeria, and it gets exiled through Voidwalker. Ryan casts a Humble Defector. He casts a Wheel of Fortune. In response, Ashani casts a Braid, dealing 3 damage to Voidwalker, killing it. Wheel of Fortune then resolves, and each player discards their hand and draws 7. Ryan plays a Mountain for turn. He sacrifices his Crystal Vein to add 2 colorless. He casts a Mana Vault. He casts a Valakut Awakening, putting all 4 cards from his hand onto the bottom of his library and drawing 5. He casts a Lotus Petal. He casts a Mox Opal. He casts a Desperate Ritual, adding 3 red. He casts a Heat Shimmer, targeting Humble Defector. In response, Sean channels Otawara Soaring City, targeting Defector. Defector bounces back to Ryan's hand, and Heat Shimmer fizzles. Ryan cracks his Lotus Petal to help recast Humble Defector. He moves to combat, and Rionya triggers. He targets Humble Defector, creating 6 copies. Ryan activates all of his Defector copies and draws a total of 12 cards. He gives 3 Defectors to Sean and 3 to Ashani. Ryan moves to his second main phase and casts a Mox Diamond, discarding a mountain. He casts a Final Fortune. In response, Sean casts a Dark Ritual, adding 3 black. He casts Ad Nauseam. With no other answers, Ad Nause resolves. Sean reveals a Mana Confluence, Imperial Seal, Deflecting Swat, Notion Thief, Mindbreak Trap, and a Red Elemental Blast, deciding that stopping at 3 life is probably a good idea. Sean casts Mindbreak Trap for its alternate cost, exiling Final Fortune. Disappointed that he isn't passing to himself, Ryan passes the turn. At the end of Ryan's turn, all of the Humble Defector copies are exiled, and Ryan discards to hand size. During Sean's upkeep, Ashani makes a Saproling. Sean draws and casts a Praetor's Grasp, targeting Ryan. He fetches up a card from Ryan's library into exile face down. He casts said card, which turns out to be an Underworld Breach. In response, Ashani casts Crop Rotation, sacrificing his Gemstone Caverns, fetching up a Gaia's Cradle onto the battlefield. Ashani then casts us Silence. It resolves, locking out opponents from casting spells this turn. Disappointed, Sean moves to combat. He attacks Ashani with Malcolm. Ashani takes it, Malcolm triggers, and Sean creates a treasure. Sean shifts the turn to Ashani. At the end of Sean's turn, Ashani activates Temur Sabertooth and returns Rocco to his hand. Sean discards to hand size, and the turn moves to Ashani. During Ashani's upkeep, he loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and plays a Temple Garden into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Grand Abolisher. With no answers, Abolisher resolves, locking out opponents. He casts an Eternal Witness. It enters, and he returns Dockside Extortionist from his graveyard to his hand. He casts Dockside Extortionist. It enters, creating 11 treasures. Ashani presents a loop of bouncing Dockside to his hand with Temur Sabertooth and recasting it again and again to create infinite treasures. He returns Eternal Witness to his hand and casts it. It enters, and he returns Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker from his graveyard to his hand. He returns Eternal Witness to his hand and recasts it. It enters, and he returns Imperial Recruiter from his graveyard to his hand. He casts Imperial Recruiter. It enters, and he fetches up a Village Bellringer into his hand. He casts Kiki Jiki. He casts Village Bellringer. It enters, and in response, Ashani taps Kiki Jiki to create a copy of Village Bellringer. He presents a loop of untapping Kiki with the Bellringer's ETB, creating a copy of Bellringer and repeating it until he has infinite Bellringers with haste. He attacks each of his opponents for lethal, and Ashani wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a game. Congrats to Ashani on his win. He was able to assemble powerful combo pieces on the board with the help of Toski's card draw to win with a classic Kiki Jiki combo. The most valuable card in tonight's game, sponsored by Luxury Playstyle, goes to Toski, Bearer of Secrets. This card creates such a quick advantage swing the moment it hits the battlefield. Ashani was able to draw multiple cards and find the interaction and answers he needed to control the game and close it out. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.